And we're live. So I'm going to do a 3, 2, 1 countdown. So then I'll start. 3, 2, 1. Well, welcome to the story of my life with friends. And today I've got a good friend on, my friend Joe King. Joe is we're going to call him a national political strategist. And Joe and I have been friends for 27 years. Oh my
gosh, when you say that
we met at the age of 27. So if anybody can do math, you can tell how old we are. And I think Joe is a month older than I am, right? I think you're June of 60. June of 68. Is that right? I'm July 68. I think you're like a month older than I am.
Dude, thanks for outing my age.
Well, what are you going to do?
You look at me.
What are you going to do?
Over the young guy.
That's not true. Over the hill, ready to roll. So I haven't really involved politics a lot on this podcast, and frankly, Joe, I really don't want to talk about. We'll talk about people and events, but I don't want to talk about policy, if that's okay with you. Because I've always said that would be too obvious for me to get on and start talking about my opinions about policy or so forth. So, like I said, Joe and I, we met in 1995, and he recruited me to the Pennsylvania Republican Party. I got married, and a month later, not even a month later, I was on my way to Pennsylvania, all because of Joe King. And I will tell you, and this, what I'm about to say is true, there has not been a more supportive person, very few anyway, my business partners obviously, but my former business partners, there hasn't been a person that's been more supportive of Sam during my career than Joe King. He's always been a cheerleader. He has helped me get, I don't want to say numerous, but at least 2 very significant positions or work. And thank you for that, Joe. Because of you, I retired last year, so I appreciate it.
How come I'm not
You're the man. Well, because you have 4 kids, and I don't have any kids or pets or plants. So that's why. Well, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate. We're gonna have some fun today. We're just and these are random questions, and there are some of our former coworkers, which I won't say which ones, have actually submitted some questions as well.
Oh my gosh!
So we're gonna have.
You're killing me.
We're gonna have some fun. What I'd like to do, so Joe was the executive director at the Pennsylvania Republican Party, and he hired me to be finance director, and he convinced me to move from Lincoln to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and he was also executive director of the Georgia Republican Party after Pennsylvania. A quick story about the Pennsylvania GOP experience, and I told this in Republican National Committee campaign finance colleges for years, and I actually presented this as one of their first assignments was to solve this problem. That Joe King, real life actually happened. I walk in the office and don't know a soul in the state, obviously, and I couldn't have been there more than 3 hours. And here comes Joe. He goes, "I have got a tremendous," and King is the biggest spinner of shit. I mean, more so anybody you've ever met in your life. But he presented this thing as, "I have a tremendous opportunity for you. You have to raise $60,000 in the next 48 hours for us to make payroll." Now, is that a true story, Joe King?
That is a true story.
And was it really that great of an opportunity, Joe, or were you just telling me it was a great opportunity?
I mean, what a wonderful opportunity for you to make a mark right out of the gate. Than to make sure that people don't go without food on their table.
That's right, man. And we got it done. It really wasn't that. Won't tell you how I did it, but it wasn't that hard. But it was scary. It was a scary moment in my young career. I think you and I probably grew up a lot at the Pennsylvania GOP. Sure. So what I wanted to do, and if you want me to, I'll answer the same questions. so I want to take the Pennsylvania GOP and I want to take the Georgia GOP, and I want to ask 4 different questions about each one. So are you ready?
Sure.
So I can answer. I can help with the Pennsylvania GOP, or I can answer the Pennsylvania GOP questions as well. So we'll have some fun. What did you like about the Pennsylvania GOP working there?
Oh gosh,
it was called Republican State Committee. My apologies. Yeah, RSC.
I mean, I think it was a different. I come from Ohio, and I had just come off of running a statewide campaign there where we won a race that no one expected us to win. And so then I pick up and move to Pennsylvania, and I don't know anybody. And what I loved about it is just, it's a kind of like you. I get there and all of a sudden, and there's some turmoil, and they had just elected a new governor and a new United States senator. And, there was, as there always is right after an election, there's different factions. And so, they had decided, hey, we're not going to make any of the factions. Well, Anne Anstine decided, we'll talk about her in a minute, but decided, hey, we're not going to make any of these factions happy. We're just going to hire somebody from the outside. And that's how I got there. But yeah, I mean, I loved my experience at the Pennsylvania Republican Party. I think because it's just filled with characters. I mean, they have these things called caucus chairmen around the state, and these people were just, interesting characters. And there was our finance chairman and committee, and that was filled with some pretty iconic people in the state. And
I just thought of the name Ash Carey for the first time in 27 years.
That's the exact character.
God bless you, Ash.
That's the exact
Ash
character.
Carey.
Yeah, it's the exact character.
Like he called me the first day in the job. He called me the first day. It's like one thing I discovered about the Pennsylvania GOP is that finance director was actually kind of a big deal. I mean, like you're sort of like you had a little weight. Or I didn't know it at the time, but Ash all of a sudden I felt important. So. Yeah. God bless Ash.
Yeah, and I think
I didn't even thought about. I was just sitting there thinking, what's that guy's name? Ash Carey. There you go.
That's exactly who I was thinking about. That's funny you say that. Yeah. So when I said characters, that's exactly what I think. I mean, he was just kind of this bigger than life caricature of himself, but with a passion for the party. Yeah. And to your point, he legitimately is one of these people who, cared about other people. And so he calls you right away, and he did the same for me. And not only did I like the characters, but had the opportunity really to work closely with Tom Ridge when he became governor. At the same time that I was going in there, and his team, and he was a man's man, or a people's person. He was pretty unassuming for the most part, and yet he had the ability to walk into a room and kind of suck the oxygen out of it at the same time, But there was an informality about him sometimes too that I loved. One day we were waiting on election returns, and he keeps calling. I want to know what's going on. I want to do it. Finally, he's like, "Heck, I'm just coming down there." And then he sits across the,
I remember that.
Sits across from my, from my desk for the rest of the evening while we. Got election returns, and it was kind of he was a cool guy. And so, I mean, Pennsylvania Republican Party, and of course, particularly then, I mean, it's a very important state, one of the largest states in the nation. And, and the politics were unique. It was a different experience than the one I had in Ohio. And, and I had, which I had to be reminded of from time to time, because when you're young, and you have some experience with some amount of success, and then go to a brand new place and you think everything should run like the place you left. And that was a great life lesson of, you don't go into a new place where they don't know anybody and try to tell them how things were done in the last place you were, So, yeah. So anyway, and of course, Anne Anstine.
Well, Yep. And let's talk about Anne for a second. Tell me, I mean, she was tough. Yeah. One of the most toughest political characters that I've ever encountered, male or female. And she was, how old was Anne? 70? I don't. She was an older lady, but she commanded respect.
Yeah, and it didn't matter who. I mean, the governor listened to her. The senators listened to her.
Yeah.
We had, you're right. She commanded a lot of respect. And I was lucky that way, I think, because, I had, as a young operative, to have somebody seasoned like that over me, who really, as you know, empowered everybody around her. And yet, even when she wasn't in the office, because the chairman, doesn't come in the office every day, so they leave you with, some direction and some boundaries, and you have to go figure out the details. And, her presence was there, whether she was there or not. You know what I mean? And because she demanded that kind of respect, and she was not the kind of person that demanded loyalty. You were just loyal because she was that kind of a character. She supported her team, and
she was a leader.
She was a leader. And like I was saying,
she was a leader.
And so I consider her really a mentor of mine. And I've been.
I do too.
It's funny. I have there's I think you know this. There's an institute named after her now in Pennsylvania, Leadership Institute, Anne Anstine Leadership Institute, which is a really great place for young, particularly women, to learn some of those leadership skills and talk about public policy in different ways, and really support one another. And I, coming from Ohio, another one of my great mentors was a woman named Joanne Davidson, for whom there is a Leadership Institute named after. And so these two really tough, strong, thoughtful women, who were kind of paving the way in our party, became mentors of mine. And so I think about this sometimes, because they have a Leadership Institute that teaches, women to mentor other women. And I think the strongest legacy of these people, particularly Anne, taught women how to mentor young men as well, and so through their strength and leadership ability. So she was tough, though. There's no question about that.
Yep, very tough. I remember a story that you told me about. I think these folks have all passed away, so we can talk about it. But something to the effect of, she told off Bush 41 in the Oval Office. You remember that? You remember that story?
Yeah. And there's a photo.
You comfortable sharing with that?
There's a.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
A photo of him scowling.
But even, it was. I don't know if I don't know if you want to tell that story or not, but she was not above scolding him in the Oval Office. And she with a room full of men, she was the only woman in the Oval Office, and it was a great story. We probably don't want to go into details,
honestly,
but
I don't remember many of the details at this point. But I do.
I do.
That happening.
I do. I'll never forget. I wasn't there, but you told me about it. I mean, it had to do with the fact that it's my podcast, so sue me. It had something to do with the fact that they wanted Dick Thornburgh to run for Senate.
Right.
And she just said to the president, he can't win.
That's right.
And that's exactly how she would say it too. He can't win. And and the president is like, well, what do you need, Anne? Well, I need you to come in here 4 times or whatever. She got what she wanted. Right. She knew that she wasn't going to get her way, but she got, like, what do you need from me? Well, you need to come in here X amount of times or something. But she was right. He didn't win. She knew the state inside and out, backwards and forwards.
The story goes on that, too. When she got the answer she wanted, she got up and went. That's how she was.
Oh.
She got the and that's a great life lesson, right? When you made the sale, stop talking.
Exactly. Shut your mouth. Right. SYM. Shut your mouth. That's right. That's right. That's right. Great story. And the 2 other quick stories about Anne that I remember. One was the actual meeting of Anne for the first time. We were at, we had gosh, we had breakfast, or no, we had lunch. We had lunch at the Hilton. I can't remember the name of the place now. Mulberry. It doesn't really matter, but I think it was the Hilton. And I think the reason I was hired was because she knew that I had come from a ranch background. I had come from an agricultural background, and her eyes just lit because she came from a place called Juniata, right?
County, yeah.
These are Juniata County, and she grew up on a farm, I believe, or she was from a rural countryside or whatever, and she thought it was a big deal. And I told her about I grew up on a cattle ranch, 30,000 acre cattle ranch, and she, I think that was the reason I was hired. But I remember back then I was such a nervous wreck about everything. I'd get worked up about things. I mean, I used to get physically ill for events, for instance.
Really?
I just got
honestly, you didn't show it.
Well, I was sick, but I shook her hand, and my hand was sweaty and clammy, and you told me about it afterwards, you asshole. You told me driving me back to the Baltimore airport. You're like, well, she likes you, but she said, boy, he has sweaty hands. I'm like, well, I guess I'm not moving to Pennsylvania, but I did move to Pennsylvania, and she was at a RNC meeting with my chairman, rest in peace, Chuck Segerson. And she went and right up to Chuck and said, I'm taking your finance director. Like, she was proud that she'd gotten this prize. So, love her to death. And then the other real quick war story was, it was one of the first trips that her and I hit the roads to raise money. And I was in Pittsburgh, and this is way before GPS or any of that jazz. I had like MapQuest maps, like
printed out.
And I got on the wrong bridge going across Pittsburgh, and she starts getting on the phone to, I don't know, like Elsie Hillman or somebody, or somebody important, and she said, well, where are you? And she was, I don't know. They put me with some guy from Nebraska, and I'm just like,
that's it.
I'm like stressed out, like trying to, because you got to drive 10 miles to turn around now. God love her. I miss her. I do. It was, you remember
I'll tell
those
you one
things.
more story about her, because I went with her on a fundraising visit to a major donor, and we were on our way to another event. So this was kind of being worked in, and we were there to ask this gentleman, I can't remember his name now, but we were there to ask him for, I want to say $10,000. And so we go in, we sit down, we're having over coffee, and I'm young and just talking to him a little bit. He's asking me questions about myself, and so Anne's finally she looks at her watch and she goes, okay. And so I can't remember the gentleman's name, but let's call him Harold.
Was a BM? Was that the initials?
I don't think so. I don't. I wouldn't remember. It's so long ago now, Sam.
I'll bleep this out during the podcast. What was it? Bob Muma?
I don't. I honestly do not remember.
Again, these are names that are just popping in my head. Anyway, go ahead.
So anyway, Anne goes in. We're having this conversation. Finally, she realizes we got to get to this next event, which was really, my job to tell her, hey, we got to get moving, but she had to do it for herself. So bad staff work on my part. But so she goes, she says, okay, I'm going to call him Harold for purposes of this story. So she says, Harold, I need $10,000 for my party. That's what she always called, the Republican Party in Pennsylvania. That was her party. She would always call it her party.
Her party.
I need $10,000 for my party. And you got to understand, she's sweet, white-haired looking woman.
Looks like you're somebody's grandma.
Totally. Yeah. And he hems and haws a little bit. He says, things are a little tight right now or whatever he says. But so he writes her out a check for $5,000 and hands it over to her. And she picks up the check. She looks at it, and she puts it back down on the table and pushes it back to him and says, oh, Harold, I know how much money you have. Now you keep this and you send me what you think is right. Come on, Joe. And we left with no money. And in the FedEx the next day was a check for $10,000 and an apology. So
Great.
she's a tough lady,
It's stones, man. Stones. I love it.
man. So
I love
it's
it.
great.
What would you have done differently at the Pennsylvania
Oh
GOP?
gosh, that's a great question.
The famous interview question.
Yeah, I mean, well, so many things, I mean, I think, the interesting thing about this business is, these kinds of jobs, executive director of the Pennsylvania, have a tremendous amount of responsibility, but without a whole lot of budget behind it. And so they hire young people to fill these positions, right? So you're kind of learning as you go. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are strategic decisions that you'd make differently, but I don't know. I suppose I would have worked a little bit harder, to sort of try to build bridges. There, as you know, I say this a lot. The Republican Party is
It was hard.
yeah, the Republican Party is not an interest group. It is a coalition of interest groups, right? And so they don't all agree with each other, as we all know now. And so, we get so focused on the election goals that sometimes, the legacy of trying to build bridges to create more unity within the ranks sort of gets lost by the wayside, because as the election draws closer, the differences sort of fade away for a while, because you've got the election in front of you, and that everybody starts getting fixed focus. They stop focusing on what divides us as a party and start focusing on, well, we at least have to beat the other side. We know that. And so,
that's the toughest battles we're fighting now.
Right.
It's a math equation, folks.
Right,
You want to win.
Right. And so, I really do wish we would have spent a little bit more time, or I would have spent a little bit more time trying to build those bridges and create points of unity and things of that nature. But I think when you're young, sometimes you're just not thinking about, the long term as you start to do as you get some gray hair.
Yeah. And for me, I would have been so much more aggressive. I would have had, I mean, I didn't have any, this may surprise you, but I don't think I was nearly confident. I wasn't confident at all. I've always been a grinder. I mean, I just show up and try and do what's needed to get done and go home. But I would have been a little, because I think I would have been more confident. I would have been a lot more aggressive. If I'm being honest.
Yeah. Well, me too. In some cases, there are times where I look back and think there are some stories where I thought I was overly aggressive, and then there are times where I thought, I probably should have taken some chances. So,
yeah.
But, I believe there's a God in heaven, and, everything happened the way it was supposed to happen because it did.
Well, as your, my friend Chris Carr, right?
Oh yeah. Good man.
Okay. So he's a great man. As Carr says, he always points to the sky and he's like, big guy knows, and that's exactly right.
He ain't lying. Louisiana boy.
That's right. Well, tell me. So then you go from. So now you've had about 2.5 years. I think you were a PA, and then you were actually doing both jobs simultaneously for a couple of months, which is insanity.
That's the thing I wish I wouldn't have done.
Well, that's the part That's the part that I probably dislike most about the PAGOP when you did that, because it was tough. But luckily I'd been there long enough that I was starting to get some wheels. I was starting to really develop some relationships and so forth. But so how was it? So you take this knowledge and then you go to the Georgia GOP. Tell me about that. Tell me about the same kind of thing. What were your likes? What were your dislikes? What were the biggest challenges that you faced there? And how were they different?
It was what a different culture, especially at that time. that came about in a strange way. I was at an RNC meeting and met the chairman there. And next thing I know, he asked if I would be willing to talk to his search committee because they were going to hire somebody new to take over the reins of the party there in Georgia. And that was at a time when a lot of those southern states were beginning to transition to becoming red states. And so as it was described to me early on, it's like, the Republican Party down here, of course, in a southern drawl, but the Republican Party down here is kind of like a social club. We get together every once in a while to argue about who's going to go to the national convention, because there was a point in time where they didn't really have any hope of winning. But, it had grown into, they kept winning races and winning races. Newt Gingrich, is elected and becomes Speaker of the House. And, Paul Coverdale's the United States Senator from there. And, people started winning races in Georgia. And so they wanted to, so that was a case where they really did want to learn about putting together political programs and things that could be sustainable and build an infrastructure to win elections. And so that was a different job in that, there were things that I took for granted as sort of, the basics of what we do that weren't in place there yet, and so, and they had 126 counties. I could be wrong on the number, but, and there were a couple dozen of them without any Republican structure at all in it. So, whereas you go from, a place like Pennsylvania or Ohio or, whatever, where there's a strong sort of infrastructure for the party in almost every county, that wasn't the case down there. So you're sort of building from scratch, and some of that infrastructure wasn't in place. And so it was a different kind of a gig all the way around. Yeah. But and they're different, they're different people, and, particularly then, a little mistrusting of a Yankee coming down there, so.
I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, so my chairman's name was Rusty Paul. He's still around. He's actually the mayor of Sandy Springs down there now. And Rusty, talk about a character. I love the man. I still talk to him every once in a while. Just a really good guy. And so he introduces me to the state committee, to all the the key stakeholders, and kind of talks me up. And he's saying things about me I'm not even sure were true, honestly. Like I don't know who that guy is, but he sounds awesome, And so he introduces me, and a woman in the front row raises her hand, and he said, "Oh yes, question." She is, "Rusty, couldn't we find someone from down here to do that job?" Right to my face. That's how I was greeted. So so
that's hilarious.
That's
that prompted me to remember. It's funny, you just talking, I remember things. When I don't know if you remember this, but when I came in, I was introduced to their executive committee too. I was escorted in, escorted out real quick, and Senator Bob Jubileer found out that I was from Nebraska, and he goes, "Hey, we just got your chancellor, Graham Spanier, who we all know." If you Google him, we all know what happened to that guy, right? And anyway, I said, "Well, you can have him." And boy, that didn't. I think you had to fix that. Honestly, that didn't go over well because I just came out blunt.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, I was right, because if you Google freaking Graham Spanier, I think Jubileer was indicted for something too, wasn't he? But anyway,
that was after me.
That's right. But it's just funny. It's those first impressions are important, and I've never in my life made a good impression, but except for Anne, so that was good.
Like you.
Well, my clammy hands overcame my clammy hands. So shifting gears a little bit.
I will tell you just
go ahead.
Sell yourself short, because I'll tell you why you did a good job, and life lesson for people is. You might have in your head had a little lack of confidence over but there really is a genuine authenticity about you that honestly, since I've gotten to go to Nebraska several times, really seems to be a character trait of the state. Honestly, there's just an authenticity about the people, and certainly an authenticity about you, and that comes through in conversations. You feel like, what you see is what you get, and so there's like, and that puts people at ease, and I think that's why you're able to do a good job. And don't forget, you built some programs there, that's old technology now, but at the time, there were fundraising programs in place that you set up there that lived for a long time after you left because they were so successful. And so, for as much as you say, hey, I lacked some confidence, we all lack confidence. Everything's a cover up. Everything's a cover up.
That's it. Yeah. Hey, you were scared too? Oh, we were all scared.
Yeah,
oh, okay. I mean, it's like,
what was I, 27 years old? What the hell did I? What business did I have doing that job? So yeah. I mean, we learn from those things.
Exactly.
You fake it till you make it.
That's right. That's right. Awesome. So you and I, I'm not gonna. Well, you've served on some presidential campaigns, and I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about that. I have also. Is there any good stories, like a war story, that our listeners might be interested in, that you can tell? Presidential campaigns are odd things, and boy, talk about one's definitely not the same as the other.
Yeah, I mean,
anything there?
I'll say this. I mean, I think campaigns in general, people who aren't in our business, either think everything's a smoke-filled back room, or they romanticize the business, and
it's not.
I mean, this is
like the West Wing is like everybody pictures West Wing. Everybody be really intelligent and articulate and all this. It's not at all.
I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that so the stories are, you get into these rooms, and you walk in, and because of things like that, West Wing, you get into a conference room and you think, okay, now I'm walking into, probably a room of the smartest people in America, and not to disparage anybody I worked with, because I did work with some very smart people, but
I have too.
And therefore you're going, you're sort of afraid to talk at first, particularly if you're on your first sort of massive effort, right? And even when you have an opinion, you're going, should I say something? Should I say something? So you throw out a basic idea, and, oh my gosh, that's a great perspective. All of a sudden you realize, well, okay, But I'll tell you, it's not necessarily on the campaign story, but to that point, that's the sort of first time you come across something, I guess. When I was asked to help out with the John McCain effort, and so I was invited to come out and meet with him, and he, wanted to talk to me about who I was, and he asked some very pointed questions, almost like I was like, is there a right answer, wrong answer, and who'd you work for, and what other things have you done, and he wasn't shy about telling me of the people I worked for, who he liked and didn't, and I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna say negative things about somebody who gave me an opportunity, so I wasn't gonna agree with him, and but then, so it was sort of this pointed conversation, and he was, as I mean, John McCain was an icon, and to me, whether or not, and I remember saying to somebody, I don't, I'm not walking around the earth agreeing with everything John McCain does or says, so it's like, but there's a respect that you have to have for somebody with his life story.
Well, there's a reason he can't lift his freaking arms very high. I mean, come on now.
Exactly. And, somebody who's given that level of service to our country, to me, is a bigger than, particularly his whole story. He was just a bigger than life character to me, whether you agree with policy or whatever. And so to meet him and have, sort of just a casual conversation with him, but also, he's kind of asking me pointed questions, was a little surreal to me as I'm just sitting on a couch. Like, should I be sitting up straight?
Yeah.
Should I, but then afterwards they take me to lunch at the Senate dining room. And the whole time I'm trying to take,
which is a big deal, by the way. I've got to do that
right.
once, and the only way, so our listeners know, the only way you get to go do that is if you're with the member of the Senate, and not very many people get to do it. So you and I have both done it. I sort of relatived into it, but
well, I don't know,
and I didn't even know it was a big deal until I
right,
did it. You're like, oh,
well, I knew
this is a really big deal.
The whole time I'm trying to take in the experience through my peripheral vision, like, oh, this kind of thing happens to me all the time. But everything, I want to steal a napkin, maybe some silverware, just as a moment. I did not do that, by the way, for your listeners, but you just gotta, so those moments, every moment for me on a campaign is that I remember, honestly, are the moments where you're sort of in the foxhole with somebody, because campaigns they're not glamorous. They're late nights, and I've slept under my desk more than one time. You stay up every hour you can stay awake, 7 days a week, and you're in it together.
It's a grind.
Yeah, and you're in it together with other people, and you come out of it with that shared experience that gives you really some sort of a lifetime connection.
It's a fraternity. Yeah. It's a community. It's camaraderie, whatever you want to. Yeah.
And so, that's, so to me, those are the funny stories that I remember, or the lasting stories that I remember. I remember my first couple of wins, because I think those were big deals for me when I was young. But, it's just, in the end, I look back and think of all the, like you, I mean, the friends we make over the years, because we had this sort of shared experience. We were giving everything we had to it, so.
Yeah, literally. Yep. I agree 100%. Joe King, as I mentioned earlier, is the greatest spinner of yarn you've ever seen. Do you remember? So I guess my question is, did you mean everything you said, for instance, when we were trying to sell the Tom Ridge gas tax? And I was like, how in the hell are we going to raise money now, Joe? And you're like, this is an opportunity for the greatest roads in America, and all this bullshit, Did you know that Pennsylvania has more road miles than Russia? Or just all this crap.
Yeah.
So did you mean you're a passionate guy? I'll give you that. You know how to spin, but I always wondered, does he really believe this shit? Now, you always said that I was genuine, so that's why maybe I had a hard time buying it off. So were you really genuine? And I remember the snowplow stuff. Well, that was the lieutenant governor, but, we've assembled the greatest, and I think you picked it up, we've assembled the greatest
army
snow removal operation in civilization, history of civilization. And I'm just like, shut the F up, King. Were you genuine when you said that? Why do you say that? How we talk about how people are wired. So how did you make that so? How did you come up with that?
Here's, I guess, the way I look at things like that. I mean, there are times where as an operative, as a political operative or a staff person, you're not the policymaker, right? And so, if you want to be the policymaker, sack up and go put your name on the ballot, and take those arrows.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the end, we get to participate in this process using somebody else's name. And therefore, if they've decided that this is a priority and you're on the team, it's your job to figure out a way to make, to get things done, right? But the one thing you can't do, I think, as a leader, is for a moment demonstrate to your team that you don't believe in what you're doing. There are times. Look,
Yeah, that's what I admire about you. I absolutely.
And why would anybody get up? Because this is, this, especially in those kinds of jobs, you're not doing this because they're paying you $1 million. The pay is not that great, especially in those early jobs. So, and that's not why most people get into politics to begin with. They get into it because they believe in something, and it's not just a job; it's a cause. And if you begin to show chinks in the armor and and don't show a little bit of enthusiasm for what's going on, why would they get up? There are times, Sam, I will tell you that the longer you've been in this business, you can see the win coming and you can see the loss coming. Kind of like quarterbacks in a football game would say, "Hey, the game slows down for me." This business kind of gets that way at some point. You can kind of see what's about to happen. So, but you also at no point can demonstrate to your team that you don't believe there's a chance, that you don't believe that you're going to win, that you don't believe in what you're doing. Why would somebody work so hard for a loss? And so, but I've always tried to find the balance a little bit between, being honest with people, but also not giving in to, not allowing them to see, or to think that
be negative,
that like I said,
or can't do something.
That the task in front of us is impossible. So if I said to you, "Hey, Sam, we're not going to make payroll this week, so we're all going to die," you
didn't say that, but I felt that way.
But if I come in and say, we've got a challenge ahead of us, and I think we're just the team to meet that challenge. And normally, if you have the right people, if you go out and find yourself a Sam Fisher, they rise to the challenge, and everyone goes home with a paycheck.
You're too kind. You're too kind. You're too kind. All right, there's a couple fun questions, and we'll close with a serious question. Are you a Browns fan or a Lions fan? I can't remember.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, which is basically a suburb of Detroit. And so all of our news and all of our teams, we're mostly the Detroit teams. So I grew up really rooting for, Lions, I guess. But I never really became a diehard Lions fan because why would you? They were never very good. But I was a Tigers fan. And that was kind of my team, and I sort of half liked hockey at the time, so I was always loved the Red Wings. Yeah, I mean, I've lived away from Toledo for long enough that I just kind of root for the Ohio teams now. Truth be told, I live right in between Cleveland and Columbus, and but I'm more really a college sports guy than a professional sports guy anyway.
So you think going back to the Lions, you think they have their best team since '93?
Probably since Barry Sanders, yeah.
I really liked. I don't know if you saw HBO Hard Knocks this year or not.
Only a couple
the Lions.
Episodes, yeah.
I really like their coach.
Yeah.
If he gets fired, he'd come to
me too.
Nebraska.
Talk about a leader.
Yeah, great guy. This is another fun one. What are the top 5? Is the leading question, but what's the top 5 favorite places you've seen a college football game?
Well, you know my answer to this. You know that I love.
Well, I know one of the 5. I know one of the 5.
Obviously, the best is the experience you get at the Ohio State University. But as you, I've been to a lot of them, and I love Lincoln, Nebraska. I love everything about Nebraska football. That's why I was asking about it. There are many places that think they have the best fans. Nebraska actually has the best fans. If you've never been to,
this year, I'm really convinced of it. When you got 90,000 people in the stadium for a team that just lost to Georgia Southern and are getting crushed by their old rival.
It is a fan base, honestly, that deserves the very best. They're diehard. You sit in the stadium, as I have several times now, and the people are knowledgeable about the game. They're supportive all the time. They're respectful to the opposing team. They're, maybe it might be the last bastion of sportsmanship, in the world, because you go anywhere else and it's not like that. I will tell you, having gone around.
There's other places. Yeah. Where else have you been?
If you've not been to a Texas game, it's a terrific experience.
I agree with that.
They do it upright, and I mean, they tailgate like, they're good at it. Texas is its own thing, man, and it's and the Longhorns are sort of the white hot center of it. I think, no offense if you're an Aggies fan or something else, but I just, to me, Austin is such a great town, I've been there twice and loved the experience. I always liked when I lived in Pennsylvania, I went up to see Penn State games a little bit, so that was a terrific experience.
I love Penn State. I mean, that's pure tailgate. Because it's so far away from everything, you're forced to tailgate.
Yeah, 100%.
I was actually, the last time I was there was when the first game that Joe Pa was not coach. They were playing Nebraska, and it was like a funeral there. It was a weird atmosphere.
Yeah, they went through some tough times, but, that's a program on the rise, and, I'm no college football.
Yeah.
But, I will say, the SEC games, we're taught to not like the SEC and the Big Ten, but, the SEC games are something to see, man.
Hey, I've been to an LSU-Alabama game at nighttime, and like, whew, it's like, hey, it's on.
Yeah. I love the experience I had at Georgia in Athens, Between the Hedges. That was...
Did you do so... Between the Hedges, isn't the world's largest cocktail party Georgia, Florida?
Yeah, they held that down in Jacksonville, but that's pretty cool.
Okay.
But to go to a Georgia home game is something to see. I mean, that's a rabid fan base.
Well, they're really good.
If it couldn't be my Buckeyes, I was, they have been a long suffering fan base that and it was due them, and so I mean. I've been to all the stadiums in the Big Ten, I think, but they all have something unique. I went to a Tennessee game once; that was pretty cool. That stadium was a monster. You got the river
Rocky
come
top.
up and boats on the river and so forth. So yeah, I mean, everybody has something that's truly unique, and it's a fun Saturday. And as my kids started getting older, I'd take them on the road, and in fact, my sons are,
we got to get them to Nebraska. Well, I don't know where we're going to be good again, but you'll still have the same experience as far as the fans. And, I encourage people if they come to a Nebraska game to wear their opposing colors, because people will literally go up to you off the street and say, hey, is there anything you need? Or are we treating you okay?
100%.
I mean, it's like, you're like, what?
100%.
I mean,
it's like I said, it's a lesson in, in civility and sportsmanship. In fact, we ought to basically do an entire case study of Nebraska football fan base and learn how to bring America together using those same qualities.
Well, there you go. I like that. That's all right. I like that. So here's a question from someone you and I both know who may or may not have been at a Nebraska game at the same time we were at. But the question reads as, how many elk pisses do you need to sing Hang On Sloopy at Sidetracks? And for the record, Nebraska listeners aren't going to know what elk piss is. Elk Creek's at Sandy's. But
well, I don't...
It was a good time.
I don't know how many it should take, but I know how many it did take.
How many they used?
I think 5, maybe. And it wasn't good. But
no, it's not. It's
not. Why am I drinking this again? But yeah,
because you're in Nebraska and it's 9 a.m. and the game's at frickin' 7 p.m.
Right. Yeah, that was good. Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, I've been known to grab a microphone from time to time.
Yeah, you sure have. Okay, the last question is my Barbara Walters question. So, always get everybody all revved up, and then all of a sudden you turn and you make your guest cry. But I'm not going to try and make you cry. But when you and I were in Pennsylvania, something very tragic happened in your life, and I remember it like it's yesterday because I held your daughter, Cameron, right? She was not very old, and I held her, but your brother passed away in a boating accident. How has that affected your life? Because it's a day that I won't forget. I didn't know your brother. We've talked about him, but I know he had you're very close to him, and we talk about grief a lot on this podcast, actually. But how has that impacted your life? How did you live life differently after losing your brother?
That's a great question. When that day happened, I loved my experience in Pennsylvania, and made some good friends because of it that I still talk to today. That was the first day that I lived there that I felt away from home, like I needed to get back in a hurry. And, it was it was probably the worst day of my life, of course. But I remember I got the news. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I sort of vaguely remember this, but, and I, I just lost I couldn't stand up. I literally was in a fetal position on the ground in my office.
You're on the floor.
And nobody knew what to do.
You're on the floor.
So the staff's all walking by my office, and they didn't know what to do, so they just kind of quietly closed the door. What's going on, But I was just, you're grief-stricken, and it's just...
I remember Meg Goldthorpe, who's now a new listener of this podcast.
Hey,
I actually haven't talked to Meg in forever, but she loves this podcast. Anyway, I remember her coming in like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, call Julie. Somebody call Julie. Yeah. I mean, that's what I would, does she know? I don't know if I take credit for that or not, but that was my thought. And so Julie came over and Julie came into our office and she handed me Cameron. I'm like, here, I'll take her.
Yeah, that was tough. Yeah, she drove me home that day and everything. Yeah. And then we were trying to get a flight home and, had to wait around for the flight. I had to wait 6 hours, and you're, not, there's a weird quiet that comes over you. And then I remember I spent the time waiting for that flight meticulously cleaning my house. Like I just had to do something, and which, my wife would tell you might have been the last time I meticulously cleaned the house. But, and that's, that was a tough time, obviously. My parents were so grief-stricken that they couldn't do anything. So then I had to take care of all of the arrangements for the funeral, and everything.
It's heavy responsibility.
Experience. You walk into a room and there's a showroom of caskets, and you got to pick out a casket, and I just collapsed. And then you got to pick out a plot of land where they're going to put them, and then you got to figure out what church you're going to do a service. And, there's just all of these things that every one of them is a decision that brings you closer to the realization that this isn't going away. This is real. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
And to your point a moment ago, I've been able to talk my way out of some really rough situations in my life, and that's one I couldn't talk my way out of. And it was final. It was permanent. And so you asked me what changed. I'll tell you, I was at the funeral, at the visitation, and a very good friend of mine, woman, came up to me and she said, we were thinking about you and we're praying for you, like everybody says, and we'll be praying for you. And I just said some hateful things about God right to her face. So how could it's unfair and take my brother and so forth. And she just grabs me a little harder and she says, Joe, this is not the time to turn away from God. Now, we'll be praying for you. Looks me right in the eyes and says this. And so, we had to go through the whole thing, the funeral procession, and, get some affairs in order. And, I spent 5 or 6 days. And, that was Labor Day weekend. So, as you know, that's the kickoff of campaign. So I had to
into it.
So I'm spending all this time back with my family, and there's real campaign stuff going on back with you guys, and So I knew I had to get back. But anyway, we're going home, and lots of deep conversations with my parents and friends and family and that kind of thing. And the whole way home, all I could think about was this woman who grabbed me and said, "This is not to turn your back on God. Now we'll be praying for you." And that conversation ran over my head over and over. And finally, I turned to my wife, who, by the way, was raised Jewish, and I said, I want to go to church on Sunday. We got to pick a church and go to church on Sunday. And for somebody who didn't go to church, obviously, because she was Jewish, but my brother had just died, so she was going to say yes to whatever I asked for, and so we did, and we went to church, and I said, we'll make a day, we'll go to this church that we found, and we'll go to breakfast, we'll go to brunch afterwards, and, kind of make it a Sunday thing. This was back in Harrisburg now. And, so it was a little church, small building. There were probably maybe 100 people in there, so it wasn't a big congregation. But the pastor shook everybody's hand as they left. He stood at the front door, shaking, talking to people. He knew most everybody. And so I decided, hey, we're going to Applebee's for brunch. So we're going to sneak around him and get to Applebee's. And so we're sneaking around him. He turns to me and he says, "I don't know you, but I feel like you and I should get together." And so he said, "Hey, can I buy you lunch this week?" And so I went and had lunch with this pastor, and he, he's just a really neat guy. And it wasn't too long after that kind of, I found the Lord, and we went to church every Sunday after that, and really deepened my faith in a way that I didn't think possible, and so everything changed. And so you don't know it at the time, but there are these moments that seem tragic at that moment, and it is tragic, that have a very big purpose. And that was a life-changing moment, course correction for me, and changed everything about who I wanted to be and how I wanted to live, and what I wanted my children to see in me. And there was I saw this thing. I didn't make this up, but it's like, Lord, I want to be more like you because they want to be more like me. You're talking about your children, and that was always something that stuck with me after that. And so when I moved to Atlanta, we found a different church, and I touched base with I found another church and made some incredible friends in this church, and even deepened my faith. And my wife, became a Christian, and we're, everybody was baptized together with my children, and it's a big part of our family and who we are. And I think, it creates, so it as tragic as that was, and it was, it makes you, that everybody who loses somebody too soon, they think, man, it makes you really think about what's important, and it becomes a cliche, but it's really true. It's, there are, in that moment, the things you can't goof your way out of, or talk your way out of, or make excuses to get yourself out of it. That's a real thing, and it's permanent in you, and it's now going to be a part of you. But those things are you don't get over them, but you do learn to live with them. And you all were incredibly supportive at the time, and I couldn't have asked for a nicer. And I came back to Pennsylvania. There's flowers and sympathy cards and stuff waiting for me, and just in that moment, you just a lot of people say, I don't know what to say. You just want love. You just want to
you just be there,
right?
Yeah.
You don't have to say anything. The fact that people show up is a big deal, even if it's for 5 minutes.
Yep.
It's a big deal.
Yep, I agree. That's why I go to if I know somebody and I feel like I should, or if I know someone that I didn't know, but it's, a family member, it's important. But, well, thank you for sharing that. That was, that's quite an answer. It's quite an answer. One of the good guys, Joe King. I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate our friendship over the years.
Yeah, it's so wonderful to be with you. It's too bad it's electronically, but hope we can get together soon.
Soon, yeah. We'll bring your kids
Say
to
hi
the
to
Nebraska
Heather
game,
for
huh? We'll do. Thanks, buddy. Okay, Chad, are you there? I'll text him. We can't get off yet. I guess Chad's got to check something. There he is. Hey, hi, Chad. Chad, that was killer, by the way, Joe. I record these things like a cluster of 7, and then I kind of determine where they're going to lay out. And this isn't the season premiere. It's going to be very close to the top.